Hello kids, this is your video lesson of the day, and today we're going to be talking about Lexington and Concord, or the shot heard round the world. We have a couple of vocab words, and our first one is grievance. Now, a grievance is a complaint concerning specific actions. 8th grade, a complaint. And the significance: the colonists listed their grievances or complaints in the Declaration of Independence. They violated our rights as Englishmen. They taxed us without our consent. They forced us to quarter those dirty soldiers in our homes. Our second word is Minutemen. Now the official: men ready to fight in 60 seconds notice. 8th grade, militia that can be ready to fight in a minute. It enabled the colonists to be ready for a fight quickly. Okay, the First Continental Congress. Now, after the Intolerable Acts, the colonists had had enough. Something needed to be done. And so it didn't look like there was going to be a peaceful solution to the situation. So in 1774, 55 colonial leaders from most of the colonies met in Philadelphia to figure out what was going to be done. And there were a lot of famous guys there, like Patrick Henry, "Give me liberty or give me death." John Adams, the future second president of the United States, and George Washington, the father of our country, was there as well. So the historical significance of the First Continental Congress was, it was the first time most of the colonists came together as one. So during the First Continental Congress, they created a list of grievances. They wanted Parliament to repeal the 13 tax acts since 1763. They called for boycotts on all British goods, and they formed militias. So most of the colonists thought the fighting would break out in New England. And this is where New England is on the map, and specifically here in Massachusetts in the Boston area right here. So the colonists began preparing for war. They formed and trained militias, and the very best militia were very fast. And they were called Minutemen. Men ready to fight in 60 seconds notice. So they stockpiled rifles and muskets, and if you don't know, those are guns from the picture here. They made bullets, and back in those days they had molds, and they heated up lead and melted them down and put them in, made them into balls, and these are what they fired out of the muskets. They gathered up as cannon if they could find them, gunpowder. And one British officer said this: "The people are evidently making every preparation for resistance. They are taking every means to provide themselves with arms." So King George III: "The colonies are in a state of rebellion. Blows must decide who will control them." And General Thomas Gage, the head commander in Boston, had a few thousand troops and more on the way. "We need to take away any weapons. 2, we need to arrest the leaders. I've gotten word that the Americans are storing arms and ammunition at Concord. It's 20 miles from Boston. Get to it, men." So Gage sent 700 troops to search for and destroy all the arms and ammo they could find. And I want you to notice on their trip there, all these rocks off to the side on both sides and all these trees. So on April 18th, 1775, in the middle of the night, Dr. Joseph Warren walked the streets of Boston looking for unusual activity from the British. "Hey, the redcoats are leaving. I better tell someone." "Hey, William Dawes and Paul Revere, the regulars are on the move." "Okay, let's warn Samuel Adams and John Hancock." "Okay, they're in Lexington." "The regulars are coming out. The British are coming." So as you can see from the map here, here is Boston, and the red is the British troop movement, and they came through here, and 20 miles away is Lexington, and that's where they met the Minutemen. So fighting in Lexington and Concord. The British reached Lexington about daylight, and when they got there, there were 70 Minutemen. One of the Minutemen there wrote in his journal, "There suddenly appeared a number of the king's troops, about 1,000, the foremost of which cried, 'Throw down your arms, ye villains, ye rebels!'" So a shot was fired, and then both sides let loose. When the smoke cleared, 8 Minutemen lay dead. So how many men died? How many Minutemen died at the Battle of Lexington? 8. So the British win the Battle of Lexington, and then from here they continued on and went to Concord. So when they went to Concord, the militia actually let them into Concord. They went through the town and searched around and found a little bit of gunpowder, but most of the stuff had been moved before they got there. Paul Revere and William Dawes did their job, so they had most of their guns and weapons and bullets and everything moved and hidden by the time the British got there. On their way out was when they got into it with the British. So the British continue on to Concord, and this is the British on their way out. This is the North Bridge, and this is famous. This is still there. And they got into it there. Most of the gunpowder had been moved. The British destroyed the rest. The leaders had gone, so there was nothing else for the British to do, so they turned back. Now, on their way back, they had some trouble. Because if you notice this picture right here, there's all these rock walls lining the road on both sides all the way back to Boston. The farmland and the land in New England is very rocky. And when farmers plowed their land, they ran into rocks and they had to dig them out and move them out of the way. Then they'd go a little further and they'd run into another rock. And eventually, over the years, they had tons of rocks. So they had to do something with them, so they made walls with them. So there was tons of them all the way back to Boston. And all the way back, the colonists would hide behind these trees and hide behind these rocks, and they shot at the British troops all the way back to Boston. And there wasn't much the British could do about it. They were in a bad situation. Here's another picture showing the British marching and the colonists back here behind these rock walls. So on their march back to Boston, all along the road, farmers, blacksmiths, clerks hid behind trees, rocks, and stone fences and shot at the British. By the time the British reached Boston, they had 174 wounded and 73 dead. The Americans won the Battle of Concord. So now this is a picture of the North Bridge that you just saw in the last picture, and 150 years or so after the American Revolution, they decided to put up a battle monument here, and Ralph Waldo Emerson's poem, the Concord Hymn, was sung. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this poem, and there's a certain verse in here that I want you guys to see. So by the rude bridge that arched the flood, the flag to April's breeze unfurled. Here once the embattled farmer stood, and fired the shot heard round the world. The foe long since in silence slept, alike the conqueror silent sleeps, and time the ruined bridge has swept down the dark stream which seaward creeps. On this green bank by the soft stream we set today a votive stone, that memory may their deed redeem, when like our sires our sons are gone. Spirit that made those heroes dare to die and leave their children free, bid time and nature gently spare the shaft we raise to them and thee. So this phrase, the shot heard round the world, can you really hear a shot everywhere around the world? No. But it was so important that there were so many governments that were run by kings and tyrants. This was really the first time that people were fighting for a government that would keep people free. So everybody in the world was interested in this situation. So the phrase, the shot heard round the world, meant that everybody was interested and everybody was watching to see the outcome of this situation, to see if the Americans really could win their freedom from the strongest army in the world. So the Minutemen at Lexington and Concord fired, the shot heard round the world, and the American Revolution had begun. After Lexington and Concord, the committees of correspondence sent out calls for volunteers. Soon, militias around Boston were 20,000 strong.